how did you find just this initial looking at how our experiences of pleasant and unpleasant, how that is shared by everybody on the planet, actually?
It's very good because then we actually realize how selfish we are and how we can improve. So it's very useful to get your teaching.
I think, yeah, it also gives a sense of our common humanity, you know. We don't feel so cut off from others, perhaps, when we realize they're going through the same things as I am, just different levels of it. Some, of course, are going through intense suffering every day. Others are going through having a lot of pleasure, but everyone is connected in having these different kind of experiences and what they want, what they don't want. It's, I think, quite useful on that level. It's difficult, though, when I was thinking as I went upstairs just now. Okay, this teaching is very good, but can I apply it to this particular person? I was thinking of one particular person in my life who's actually been quite kind to me, but there are certain things there. It's not easy to apply to certain people. So one has to, I guess, just keep on practicing, seeing them in that way. Maybe some of these verses will also help, which we go through. But any more on just what we did so far? Mayank? Yeah?
Venerable, when I try to apply this teaching, the sometimes I feel a fear that if I agree that the other person also wants happiness and doesn't want suffering, I'm somehow accepting and legitimizing what the action of the other person.
That's not logical reasoning, as you know. All this meditation is trying to do is show one's common, what we share in common with others, and is basically there to help us work with our own mind of categorizing and getting involved with the poisons of ignorance, anger, attachment. This meditation is to help us. It doesn't mean we ignore or it's often the very negative, harmful behavior of others, or just let them continue doing it, or accept what they're, doing to you if it's very unjust. We're not saying that. But what we're saying is, from the point of view of my own spiritual development, if I have to develop more compassion and love, I'm going to have to see what I share in common with others, and how they are wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, just like me, and not treating them like some kind of alien who is somehow not as important as I am, because I just haven't bothered to check whether they have similar experience to me or not. I just haven't bothered to check. So from the very beginning, I treat them just as, just a visual image, passing in front of me. I don't treat them as a real human being. But even if I treat them like a real human being, doesn't mean I allow them to behave badly all the time or exploit me. That's not the meaning of the meditation. By looking at our own wish for happiness and our wish to avoid suffering, one is also making friends with oneself and generating a positive attitude towards oneself. So that's not giving others the license to mistreat us or exploit us. But again, as Shantideva said, when there are circumstances we can change, then we change them. But if there are circumstances we can't change right now, then we have to accept, and there's no point getting upset about them. We have to accept. Is there more to your question than that? I mean,
no.
Of course, people behave badly. That's the whole point of these teachings. People behave badly because they're sick. Because they're sick with all three levels of suffering. especially the third, which is the all-pervasive one, which is talking about how we all have the delusions in our mind, which lead to karma, and then it's a repetitive cycle, wheel of sharp weapons, keep on receiving the results of our negative karma, not doing anything to lessen the power of the delusions, so that cycle keeps on going, especially and we can see it playing out in our own lives, in the lives of other people. So then that can help us take at least a different attitude towards those people, even though they may be creating hell or havoc in our lives. One part of our mind can see how it's all has an explanation. One doesn't have to say, oh, I'm to blame, not like that, but we can see how there are countless causes and conditions. And that at a basic level, that human being wants the same as I do. They're just so confused. In fact, we're all confused because we all want happiness, and it's not what we're getting in life so much. So obviously all confused. We're all a little bit insane. So we're just different people in a mental asylum, basically. We're all in a kind of mental asylum. Some are just a bit crazier than others. So we have to realize that. But we're not so crazy that we don't begin to understand the cause of it and the fact that we can extricate ourselves through proper practice. That much knowledge we're beginning to have. So we're in a very good situation as well, through that understanding. Anything else based on what we looked at? Jeffrey Hopkins, the author of this book called A Truthful Heart, where he's examining this meditation in depth, says that it just takes, you have to go at it again and again. And do it slowly, starting with yourself, then friends, then people who are not such good friends, but still friends, then more neutral people. Then even with the neutral people, he says this, it's so powerful when you begin to realize that a very neutral person that you never had any thought about or feelings for, how they become somehow alive and human when you begin to apply this reasoning and meditation. That they're also people who have their small and greater joys and sufferings, just like me. They're a human being, just like me, so similar. I guess any good novel, literature, great literature, good documentary film often brings out this quality, doesn't it? We just have to learn from them. In other words, they bring out the humanity and the ups and downs of real, people's lives, so we can see how they are, just like us in many ways. That's a good film, good literature brings that out, treats. Makes us feel empathy for that other human being. Not just entertainment, or sort of cardboard characters. Anyway, anything else before we go on? Ajirji.
When people talking about the self, now, one side is that there is a sense of self which is really required because we have to function.
Yes.
But on the other hand, this self should not really become self-grasping because from there then all other things start, self-centeredness, self-interest, selfish, everything. So, to be aware that this self is not really turning.
Self is not really?
Turning. Yeah. Into self-grasping.
Yes.
That really seems very tricky.
Impossible at our stage, I think.
How do we really be aware that, yes, I think it is not moving, the self is required, but at the same time, it's not really getting into self-grasping. So, identify that point.
As a mature student, you know very well how until we attain very, very high levels of the path, we are all dominated by some degree or other of self-grasping. And by that, I think, Ajirji means we grasp at some kind of understanding of ourself as being a sort of independent, solid, real me here. who has a body, has a mind, has problems, has opinions, has desires, etc. Some kind of real me who is a little bit anxious actually all the time because I have to keep on getting positive experiences and getting rid of problematic situations and experiences. So there's always a level of anxiety or sense of being not quite, there's never that sense of complete letting go or peace because there's a sense of me all the time. Stronger in some than others, but we all have this self-grasping. So, I mean, also as you know, Ajivji, the only way out of this is to study more, reflect more, and meditate on the wisdom side of the teachings. But it is said, of course, also that the more empathetic we are, the kinder we are, the more compassionate we become, then that sense of cherishing others at least helps to begin to undermine that self-centered attitude, self-cherishing attitude, which, as you know, is the kind of behavioral manifestation of the deeper self-grasping ignorance. I mean, grasping at ourselves makes us then what we call, self-cherishing. We cherish ourselves, we care more for ourselves, we want to look after ourselves, protect ourselves. But that comes from the self-grasping. So if we can begin to work also with the self-cherishing, even though it's not the deepest level of our problem, but if we can work with our self-cherishing and care for others, then at least it helps us have experiences where we are not putting ourselves at the center of the show all the time. We are caring for others, we are taking care of them, we are, the equation includes other people, not just me all the time. But of course, that could also lead to afterwards reflecting, I'm a really good person, cherishing others, caring for others, we could have that thought at some level. So of course we have to work at the deeper wisdom level. But what I'm saying is, even for us, beginners, we can begin to understand how caring and cherishing for others does bring happiness and a sense of release from the, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche puts it, from the chains, from the chains of the self-cherishing attitude. He says the moment you cherish others, it's like being released from prison. The prison is where we are thinking of ourselves all the time. Is this going to happen? Will this happen? Blah, blah, blah. So much anxiety, so much fear, so much grasping. He says the moment you transfer your attention to somebody else, then he says it's like a prisoner being released from their chains. So even on that level, we can begin to get free, I think, a little bit of this me. I mean, for some people, it could be very powerful. Just seeing how much some other people are suffering so much, someone who's being more concerned with themselves or their family during their life, and they get some chance to really see how other people are living or suffering, and then trying to do their little bit, it can help a lot. Taking them out of their own, bubble of importance and my problem, this, that. It just goes on and on in the head, right? Because we keep on thinking about these things. So it makes it feel as though it's really solid. A solid little bubble of problems and hopes and fears. Just puncturing that by looking at somebody else's life, could be very helpful. Of course, a lot has been said about how we weave ourselves into a kind of cocoon, into a standstill with our repetitive, often useless kind of thinking. And how, although the thinking process can be very creative if it's properly directed with a skillful mind and skillful teachings, on the other hand, in general, just thinking and conceptuality doesn't have a very good press in Buddhism. Conceptuality is why we suffer. Thinking, conceiving, having images about people and things. It's going around and around. It's one of the main defenses of the ego, to keep the ego alive. We keep on having repetitive thoughts. I'm like this, I'm like that, they're like this, like that, Everything we categorize, pigeonhole, and keep it going with repetitive thinking, which almost never stops. So then we're just weaving our own samsara with our thoughts. So if we can begin to short-circuit that process, I guess people who have some experience in the basic shamatha meditation we mentioned, tranquil abiding, learning to just let go of thoughts, come back to the object, to the breath, whatever, then they're not taking their thoughts so seriously. That would seem to be a very, very, very good first step, because we trick ourselves into believing in some kind of solid reality of me and my problem and my desire, my wish, etc., etc. We create that. Often it just takes a friend or somebody to talk to us, and we come out of this kind of hallucination we were living in. Or someone talks to us in a way which is intelligent, and we realize, wow, I've just been in some kind of crazy, self-created, dreamlike world, hallucinatory world, you know. And not just a total fantasy world of an insane person, but just so caught up in my own stuff that I haven't, on that day, noticed the fresh leaves or the bright blue sky or, you know, the look on a child's face or anything. You know, I haven't noticed anything. I'm so caught up in my own drama, you know. We're all drama kings and queens in that sense. You know, because we're always caught up in our own drama. So we have to stop our drama. That's not easy. But these kind of teachings can help. Even though they're on the conceptual level, they say compassion and devotion. These are the greatest conceptual sort of thing. Aids, methods. And at a certain stage they become non-conceptual later. But right now they're the most useful things to have. This compassion, devotion towards a worthy object and so forth. So I don't know, that's the way to begin, and if one has time and is serious and is intelligent, then as you know, there's nothing comparable to the wisdom teachings to help us realize that we are not who we think we are, For someone who's realized that emptiness, then of course a sense of tremendous relief, I would think. You don't have to carry around this burden of this solid person who's always having problems and striving for this and that in a frantic way. Which is why so many of these teachers are so calm, so they're always so calm. We like being in their presence because they're chilled out, They're not caught up in some inner drama about their problem or what they want, or what's happening. And they even die that way, even though their body may be having cancer or something. Then these people die without having a problem about it, And they're still cherishing others to the last breath, kind of thing. So obviously it's something we can do, but not without that deeper level of meditation on emptiness combined with the attitude cherishing others. So let's look at how we could get to this. We're still on a conceptual level, but these are the greatest conceptual thoughts and teachings we could ever have, according to Lord Buddha, according to our teachers. So just to quote a little bit from some of these very famous 8 verses of training the mind, which is very, very important in the Mahayana tradition. So it's developed in Tibet. And there's many books on this, many commentaries on the 8 verses. But just listen to the first one. If you haven't heard it before, it could be quite interesting, quite powerful for you. And those who have heard it before, it would be interesting if we could try and listen to it with a sort of a beginner's mind, in the sense that not that, oh yeah, I've heard that before. But what's it getting at? What does this verse say? It says, with the thought of attaining enlightenment for the welfare of all beings, who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, I will constantly practice holding them dear. So there's several things being said there. One is, we have this thought to attain enlightenment. We've realized that to really help others, we have to become a fully awakened person. That in itself is a huge task. But let's say, okay, with the thought, let's say, just of helping other people for the welfare of all beings, as it says in the second line, I will constantly practice holding them dear. That's one aspect. And the other thing is, these beings are being considered more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. In myth, a wish-fulfilling jewel is something that pretty much gives you what you want. How amazing, you know. We would all like to have such a jewel. You rub it one way, it gives you the perfect companion who doesn't complain, who doesn't give you a hard time, always says nice things, always knows exactly what you need, when you need it, you know, always cooks the breakfast right. There may be some kind of wish-fulfilling jewel like that. It gives you as much money as you want, a nice house, far away from people even. Imagine having such a jewel, you know. We would think, wow, I want that. I don't need religion now. You know, I don't need Buddhism. If you can give me such a jewel, I'll take that jewel right now. You know? Can you imagine? But, saying here, beings are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, because a wish-fulfilling jewel can't help us gain an awakened mind. In fact, it would just make us more and more greedy for material and physical things to satisfy the five senses. So, wish-fulfilling jewel, yeah, useful, but only if we have a certain kind of positive mind. Here it's saying beings are much more precious than that. Why? Because it's on the basis of living beings that we attain enlightenment. What does enlightenment depend on? Depends on wisdom and great compassion. Great compassion depends on compassion. Compassion depends on holding others, seeing the suffering of others and wishing them to be free of it. That's compassion. So there's no question of that great compassion, that marvelous mind being generated without the presence of other people, other beings. We can't attain enlightenment without the presence of other human beings. That's what's being said. In fact, enlightenment doesn't make any sense without other beings, because enlightenment has been generated with the wish to benefit all sentient beings. That's what being a Buddha means, someone who has generated that thought and practiced what's necessary to attain the result. It starts with this sublime mind called bodhicitta, the aspiration to highest enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings. So for that we need others. So Buddhahood requires, the highest happiness that we can achieve in life depends on others. Quite apart from the fact that up to now we have depended on the kindness of others. Isn't it? I'll constantly practice holding them dear. Why should I hold them dear? Not just because they help me get the highest state of enlightenment, but because up to now, what? What am I going to say next? Up to now, what have these beings done? What haven't they done? They've done everything for us, no? Given us a body, given us everything, food, everything we're wearing and sitting in and on, it's all due to the effort of other people. Everything. So I'll constantly practice holding them dear. Up to now I'm holding myself very dear, which is not totally wrong, but if we overdo it, it's just a cause of pain, anxiety, suffering. So in the very first verse is saying, these beings who are so precious, I must hold them dear. Holding myself dear up to now has not worked. That's a very big part of these teachings. Seeing how cherishing myself has not worked up to now. It's only caused me problems, thinking I'm the most important one. We think it's the way to happiness because also a lot of propaganda in that regard. But just cherishing oneself is not the cause of great happiness at all. It just leads us further and further into the eight worldly feelings, doesn't it? Of pleasure, pain, gain, loss, good reputation, bad reputation, praise and blame, all of that. So that's where self-cherishing leads us. So cherishing others is what leads to happiness. We have to regard others as very dear. Like a mother feels towards an only child. We should feel that way. So this is the kindness of others we have to reflect on. We mentioned it a few weeks ago. Without reflecting on the kindness of others, we become very bitter, very unhappy, very competitive, and then we can treat others as just some kind of, we can treat others as objects who are just there to make me happy. They're there for my sake. Others are there for my sake, So the 7.3 or 4 billion people on the planet and countless sentient beings, they're there for my benefit. How ridiculous can we get? Much better to reverse that and think I'm here for their benefit. How could I be more important than so many beings? It's absolutely ridiculous. It's due to the hallucination of holding on to myself, self-grasping, which then leads to me thinking I'm very, very, very important, more important than others. There's a lot in these verses. I don't want to comment on all of them. The third one is very important in terms of our daily practice. In all actions, I'll examine my mind. The moment a disturbing attitude arises, endangering myself and others, I will firmly confront and avert it. So it's like having a really good guard at one's gate, who's really awake, really alert to whoever's coming to the gate. If anything harmful is coming, they make sure that is pushed away, is not allowed to enter. So, and if we can't do that, then at least once that disturbing emotion arises, we have the countermeasures and we let it go. So this seems very important to me, that however many great teachings we receive, if we go out the door without being aware, then we just get flooded with unwholesome thoughts and emotions. So we have to be on our guard all the time. In all actions, I'll examine my mind. So that means examining your mind when you are, everywhere. When you're walking the street, when the taxi or rickshawala is demanding a certain fare, when you are about to pay them, when you pay them. How do you pay them? Once you've agreed on everything, then do you pay them with a resentful attitude? Do you pay them with a happy attitude or a neutral attitude? How do you look at them when you're paying them? How does it work? What's happening in one's mind? What are you doing to make this other human being happy or unhappy when at root level all they want is happiness and don't want suffering, just like me? How would you like to be looked at and paid if you were a scooterwala on the streets all day in this traffic and with the air you have to breathe? How would you like to be treated by others? You see, we could think of all these things also. So next one I'm going to read and then ask you the question, why one should think in this way. Whenever I meet a person of bad nature who is overwhelmed by negative karma, negative energy, and intense suffering, I will hold such a rare person very dear, as if I had found a precious treasure. So this refers to someone of bad nature, especially someone who is not just known to you to have bad nature, but you have personally suffered from their bad nature, their negative energy, their intense suffering. Maybe you don't recognize it as suffering right now, but let's just stick with the bad nature and negative energy. This commentator is saying, this author is saying, I'll hold such a rare person very dear, very dear. Dear. Not dear as in expensive, but dear, very precious. As though I'd found a precious treasure.